any wireless media access is to provide interconnection equivalent to a wired network. So, which essentially means in wired network I could form private nets. Okay. For example, I can, if there are n computers in this room, I will be able to connect them through a LAN network. So, similarly in wireless we use something known as wired equivalent privacy. Most of you will be aware of this because you have to give a shared secret. So, it is called a shared secret. I mean, if a secret is shared, then it is no longer a secret, therefore, but it is called a shared secret. Now, the idea behind shared secret is I will be able to identify the access point to which I can connect myself. So, each access point is grouped together using a certain name, and those devices that connect to the access point using a particular name form a sort of a private network. Okay, but the idea is the web, does it provide any security feature? Okay. So, if the shared secret is known, then even an attacker who knows about the shared secret can actually log into your network. Okay. And web is actually broken because you can actually use brute force attack. Okay. There is a tool, open source tool called rcrackng, which actually uses stored passwords, okay, commonly used passwords, and it also uses brute force mechanism to join into a particular network. But then why should we learn about this? Because many of the legacy equipments still use wired equivalent privacy, and this implies that there is going to be a security loophole in any organizational network that uses web. So, the current equipments of course tell you that web is not secure, and so they ask you to move to other advanced forms like WPA or WPA2, but then you will be having legacy equipment, and if the modern equipments that you use have to support legacy, then this loophole will still remain. Okay. So, how does one identify whether the packets that traverse in a wireless network is encrypted or not? Okay. So, there are two bits that you can actually see. One is called the private bit. If it is set to 1, then the confidentiality of data frames are needed. So, and there is something known as protected bit. Okay. So, if you want to see this, just open Wireshark and then capture a wireless frame and then take a look at it. It tells you what type of security is used. I mean, if its protected bit is used, then it talks about either you can use AES based WPA2 or WPA, etc. Now, what are these next set of advanced standards that are much better than web? Okay. Those who have configured wireless routers will be aware of this. The next step that these people took was Wi-Fi protected access or WPA, and what it does is it uses key rotation, it uses an initialization vector, and then because it uses the initialization vector, the data can be encrypted much better, but the problem is that the initialization vectors number of bits that is used is limited, and because the bits is limited, and there are a lot of packets that traverse the wireless network because of A, retransmissions, B, I mean the wireless medium itself is prone to collisions. Okay. Unlike Ethernet, in wireless you are prone to a lot of collisions, and C, it kind of noise that can happen in a wireless network. So, all these things ensure that there are more packets that traverse the wireless network, and if there are more packets that traverse the wireless network, then there is initialization vector, which is a specific number of bits. I think it is around 24 bits, and so these have to repeat again and again and again, and once something repeats, an attacker will be able to identify the patterns and then break the network. Okay. So, they used so then they brought in a slightly more secure and which is difficult to break kind of a standard like WPA2. Okay. It uses something known as counter mode with a CBC MAC protocol, CCMP, a mode of advanced encryption standard. Okay. So, cyber block chaining, I mean those who have done course on network security know about what is cyber block chaining. Okay. So, use of counter mode with CBC and CCMP ensured that your protocol was almost very secure, and both WPA and WPA2 use something known as robust or called robust security networks. It uses a field called RSN, and this RSN is part of the management frame, and it gives information about the beacons, okay, the association request, the reassociation request, the probe requests, etc. So, in this way if you take WEP, it was made more secure by adding WPA2. I mean, these are actually you can call it as enhancements based on what people learnt, okay, and in this way security was enhanced, but the whole point is that wireless networks still are not secure. Okay. Coming to the next protocol, okay. So, what they did was, so can we enhance this wireless security much more? So, what they actually did was they introduced 802.1x, where if you know about the networking theory, okay, you will be aware of a protocol called PPP, point-to-point protocol. This is actually a framework of protocols which can be used for authentication, authorization, etc. Okay. So, what happened is that with 802.1x, okay, they brought in a modular and then extensible authentication framework regardless of the physical medium in which you are working. So, even though point-to-point protocol initially was for serial ports, okay, or serial point-to-point communication links, what we can do is that, okay, whenever I establish a communication with one other medium, okay, it does not matter that medium is shared, I can always go in for a handshake, okay. They use something known as a handshake protocols, okay, and I can just once only when I authenticate I can just get logged into that network. So, this is the kind of framework that is provided by 802.1x, okay. So, PPP is still commonly used over many of the protocols. I mean PPP is a framework, as I told you, and in this framework many protocols like challenge handshake authentication protocol like CHAP, okay, password authentication like PAP and EVDO and PPP over Ethernet and all those things, okay, all these things can be done. So, PPP is a kind of a protocol that sits on top of the basic medium, okay, and essentially can be used for authentication. Okay. Later on, I mean companies like Cisco, they brought in their own kind of authentication protocols like protected EAP, okay, then EAP TLS, okay, extensible authentication protocol TLS, and then lightweight authentication protocol and so on. And the advantage, the great advantage of using these kind of 802.1x kind of protocols is that it can actually take the logs and then it can establish a trail of what has happened, because the authentication packets have to traverse through the network and you can capture those authentication packets, and if there is any failure you will be able to log the failure request. So, that is one of the greatest advantage of using these kind of protocols. Okay, so, with that we actually end the session on the protocol part of it. Now, we will talk something on the device part. Okay, we will be talking about the access points in general in the next session. Thank you.